Okay, welcome back. So we should have found our 4 synonyms. These are our 4 synonyms. Never stops being amazing. Amazing in this context is a synonym for unbelievable. Consumes more chips for eats. The continents for Europe's, and annual for yearly. Those are our answers to question 2A. Question 2B needs more explanation, so we should be spending slightly longer on 2B. Using your own words, explain what the writer means by each of the words underlined. And you'll see that they give you the passage again in the question paper so that they can underline the words. So this is actually really quick to do. In the past 20 years, during a period in which the number of Britons taking traditional seaside holidays has declined by a fifth, Blackpool has increased its visitor numbers by 7% and built tourism into a 250 million a year industry. No small achievement when you consider the British climate, the fact that Blackpool is ugly, dirty, and a long way from anywhere, that its sea is an open toilet, and that all its attractions are cheap, provincial, and dire. Okay, again, pause the video here, write down your answers. What does the word period mean in this context? What does the word declined mean in this context? And what does the word provincial mean in this context? Pause the video, write down your answers. Okay, so the word period in this context means a space in time or a length of time. As long as you've got something about time in there, you will pick up the mark. Declined in this context, declined by a fifth, means it's decreased by a fifth. And provincial, trickiest one here, I think, nearly all cheap, provincial, and dire. Provincial is to do with anything outside of capital cities or sophisticated cities. So it means normally something uninteresting because it's not very sophisticated. If you've got anything there about not being very sophisticated or not being very urban, you can have that mark. Okay, 2C. Now this one is also worth 3 marks. Use one example from the text below to explain how the writer suggests disappointment with Blackpool's famous illuminations display. Use your own words in your explanation. As I read this to you, I want you to think about which phrase would you pick? One example. Pick one example that shows the writer's disappointment. So as I read it to you, think about which phrase you would choose. I thought there would be lasers sweeping the sky, strobe lights tattooing the clouds, and other gas-making dazzlements. Instead, there was just a rumbling procession of old trams decorated as rocket ships or Christmas crackers, and several miles of paltry decorations on lampposts. I suppose if you had never seen electricity in action, it would be pretty breathtaking, but I'm not even sure of that. Okay, so I think there are a few options for you to choose here to answer question 2C. We're only selecting one. You could talk about the contrast, so you could pick lasers sweeping the sky and say this shows his disappointment because that would be impressive, but what he actually saw is not at all impressive. Or you could pick one from the second part of this where he's obviously disappointed. Just a rumbling procession of old trams. That emphasize a just, and the fact that they are old trams, we could explain, shows his disappointment. I also like several miles of paltry decorations. Paltry means kind of a bit rubbish. Or this last thing, if you had never seen electricity in action, it would be breathtaking. But I'm not even sure of that. I think this is the one I'd use because I think it's quite funny. What you'll notice there is that even though they say one example, there's lots of choice. So there is no one right answer for this, but you must only choose one. What you pick up your marks for, the full 3 mark, is explaining how that one shows disappointment. So choose the one that you like best. Don't worry about trying to find everything in that paragraph. Okay, as I said, we're going to spend some more time on question 2D. So it tells us in question 2D which paragraphs we need to look at. Reread paragraph 4 and 6. Paragraph 4 begins, what was no less amazing, and is about the visitors to Blackpool. Paragraph 6 begins, I am not making this up, and is about Blackpool's beach. Explain how the writer uses language to convey meaning and to create effect in these paragraphs. How is a really crucial word here. We're not just picking out that language, we're explaining how it works, How does it affect us, the reader? Again, this should remind you of literature. Choose 3 examples of words and phrases from each paragraph to support your answer. Your choices should include the use of imagery. Now, if we come back to our yellow box here, these are the things we're looking for. So as I read paragraph 4 to you, do you notice any use of the 5 senses? Do you notice any contrast? Are there any surprising or unusual words? Can we spot any imagery, simile, metaphor, personification? So let's go back to paragraph 4 about the visitors. As I read this, think about where do you see any of those words or phrases that you think create an effect are going to be useful to write about in this question, and then I'll pick out mine for you. What was no less amazing than the meagerness of the illuminations were the crowds of people who'd come to witness the spectacle. Traffic along the front was bumper to bumper, with childish faces pressed to the windows of every creeping car, and there were masses of people ambling happily along the spacious promenade. At frequent intervals, hawkers sold luminous necklaces and bracelets, or other short-lived diversions, and were doing a roaring trade. I read somewhere that half of all visitors have been to Blackpool at least 10 times. Goodness knows what they find in the place. I walked for a mile or so along the prom, and I couldn't understand the appeal of it. And I, as you may have realised by now, am an enthusiast for tap. Perhaps I was just weary after my long journey from Portmandog, but I couldn't wake up any enthusiasm for it at all. I wandered through brightly lit arcades and peered in bingo halls, but the festive atmosphere that seemed to seize everyone failed to rub off on me. Eventually, feeling very tired and very foreign, I retired to a fish restaurant on a side street where I had a plate of haddock, chips and peas, and was looked at like I was some kind of southern pansy when I asked for tartar sauce, and afterwards took yet another early night. Okay, so we need 3 phrases here. 3 phrases which we think convey meaning and create effect in this paragraph. Just pause the video, highlight these 3 phrases for yourself. What 3 phrases would you choose? Okay, so hopefully you've chosen your 3 phrases. I'm going to show you the ones that I would use. I think I am going to use witness the spectacle, because I like how he's creating a contrast here. Spectacle makes it sound like it's something incredible and worth seeing, even though he's telling us the opposite. So that shows the contrast between how he sees it and how the visitors see it. I also like this image of masses of people ambling happily. I think I would use that. And I want to compare that to him. Feeling very tired and very foreign. So everybody else is really enthusiastic. He is not at all enthusiastic. Now, we know that for question 2D, for our each bullet point, we want to start with a sentence that pins down the atmosphere of that paragraph. I just want you to think for a second and write down one word that you think sums up the atmosphere of this paragraph about the visitors. How would you sum up the atmosphere of this paragraph about the visitors? Pause and write that down. Okay, let's see how yours compares to mine. So I think what's interesting about this paragraph is how, I'm going to use the word incredulous he is that other people enjoy it here. I'm going to say in paragraph 4, Bryson, because he's a writer, we tend to use his surname. And I'm going to use this active verb emphasizes how incredulous he is that the many visitors to Blackpool love it much more than he thinks it deserves. Hopefully you see that here I have summed up what he's trying to do, the effect he's trying to create in that paragraph. And that is what we always need to do here. What I will now do is use each of my phrases and explain How does that create this effect? So I'm going to try and keep it really concise, right? Early in the paragraph, and keep it concise, those who have come to witness the spectacle. Which implies that they see something incredible. Is using this language quite sarcastically. So early in the paragraph, Bryson describes those who have come to witness the spectacle. I've embedded my quotation to save myself some time, which implies they see something incredible. However, it's clear that he's using this language quite sarcastically. Similarly, when he describes quotation, masses of people ambling happily, he already used emphasizes, so I'm going to go highlights just how much they are enjoying to make it one sentence still. However, ambling implies a lack of purpose or a sort of stupidity. He's judging them. Right, and then my final phrase, I'm going to say, he also emphasizes his status as an outsider here in very tired and very foreign. Repetition of very showing his exhaustion with the place. Okay, so got 3 phrases from that paragraph, explained what effect Bryson is trying to create in this paragraph, and then how for each one he is doing that. We need to do exactly the same thing for bullet point 2 for paragraph 6. I am not making this up. So let's reread that one. Again, as I read, think about how you would describe this section. I am not making this up. In the late 1980s, when the European community issued a directive about the minimum standards of ocean-borne sewage, it turned out that nearly every British seaside town failed to come anywhere near the minimum levels. Most of the bigger places like Blackpool went right off the edge of the turdometer, or whatever it is they measure these things with. This presented an obvious problem to the government, which was loath to spend money on British beaches when there were perfectly good beaches for rich people in Mustique and Barbados. So it drew up a policy under which it officially decreed, this is so bizarre I can hardly stand it, but I swear it's true, that Brighton, Blackpool, Scarborough and many other leading resorts did not have, strictly speaking, bathing beaches. Christ knows what they then termed these expanses of sand, intermediate sewage buffers, I suppose. But in any case, it disposed of the problem without either solving it or costing the exchequer a penny, which is, of course, the main thing, or in the case of the present government, the only thing. Okay, so now we need to do the same thing to pin down what's the atmosphere, what's the effect that he's trying to achieve in paragraph 6, to pick out 3 phrases and to explain how those phrases help him achieve the effect that we know he wants to achieve in that paragraph. I'm going to leave you to do paragraph 6 yourself. If you are looking for this text, you will be able to find it in the link underneath this video.